I know, this is all. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. So we have a dozen or so people on the webinar right now. So if you can't hear me clearly, please type in and let us know. We've got Mary here monitoring questions. So type it in the question box if you have any questions along the way. We'll be sure to answer those as we go. But just kind of want to give everyone a preview of where we're headed this session. The session started 1 week on Monday, so we're first weekend. You can go to the first slide. There we go. So just as a heads up, this session, thankfully it's a short session. We're not in a budget year this year, so we'll be out of here by mid-March. This year we have 3 new legislators in the State House from folks who retired throughout before their term ended. So Senator Donato replaced Senator Head from Logansport. Representative Sherman replaced Representative Frizzell from Indianapolis, who retired. And Representative Vermillion replaced Representative Mahan. So other changes that are coming, House Republican leadership, I don't think it's a secret anymore. Speaker Bosma announced on Organization Day that this will be his last session. The House elected their Speaker-elect, Representative Todd Huston. Representative Todd Huston, so he will be kind of in the transition phase this year, learning the ropes from the Speaker. So interesting watching those changes. We think the House is in good hands under Speaker Huston's leadership. So we're looking forward to that transition. Just a couple notes. So you see there on the screen some important deadlines this session. So it is a short session. Things are moving quickly. We've already had 3 education committee hearings in the first week, but committee report deadlines, second reading deadlines, and third reading deadlines. The goal is for our session to adjourn by March 11th before the NCAA tournament comes to Indianapolis and kicks legislators out of their hotel rooms.
Pardon me?
All the dates there. Sorry, is there a question?
Sorry, we're trying to, if you could go ahead and mute the phones that you're on. We're getting some feedback for some individuals.
And they see the presenter lead, they don't see the whole outline.
See that.
Can everyone see the full screen right now? Sorry for the technical difficulties. All right, well, we'll keep moving. Please let us know if you're having any trouble seeing the screen. So far, we've had just under 500 bills filed. Yesterday afternoon was the filing deadline, so all legislators had to have their bills into the clerk's office and filed. That being said, many of them are not yet public, so we have to wait until the Speaker and the Pro Tem assign bills to committees, and then they'll be published. So right now, there are 285 bills in the Senate that have become public and 211 in the House. We expect a whole lot more to be filed and to show up publicly by the end of next week. So right now, the House Education Committee has 16 bills and the Senate Ed Committee has 34 bills. Move on to the next slide, please. So I think most of you are familiar with our bill tracking link. So as bills become public, we try to assign any bill that has any type of connection to education, private schools, particularly to this bill tracking link. You can click on it at any time. This link will stay the same. It refreshes automatically. So as the bills move through the process and change throughout session, this link will stay up to date, so you can always see the most recent action of the bills here. So if you want to go to that. So again, we have a lot of bills that haven't showed up yet, but this is what we have so far. So I'll just kind of hit on a couple of highlights, major categories, and then we're happy to take any questions or any other bill that you have of interest that you may want to talk about. Try to back up. So first of all, just overarching issues this session that will be of importance to legislative leaders that aren't necessarily education related. A lot of talk around healthcare and transparency around healthcare costs in the state. There are a lot of agenda bills related to that issue. Everybody seems in agreement now that the federal government has passed it to move the smoking age and vaping age from 18 to 21. And then obviously there's the teacher pay issue and just funding in general. So it is a non-budget year. It's not customary to open up a budget in a non-budget year. The state did see some excess or additional revenues that we weren't expecting. And so State House leaders have decided that they want to take some projects that were approved, some higher ed projects that were approved in the last budget, and instead of bonding those, pay for those with cash in order to free up additional resources in the next budget year. So that's the plan. We have heard a large call from educators that we should spend that money on teacher pay. So far, the governor and the legislative leaders have been consistent in their messaging that it's irresponsible to put money, one-time money that's available into teacher salaries that we don't know for sure that we can continue. So I expect that conversation to continue, but we'll be surprised if we actually by the end of session move more money into K-12 education in a non-budget year. Those are the big overarching issues that we expect to hear about at the State House. Kind of diving into education bills specifically, there were 3 bills that moved pretty rapidly this week in the House and Senate Education Committees around accountability and iLearn. So all the discussion around hold harmless. So House Bill 1001 and Senate Bill 2 are identical at this point. They have a 2-year hold harmless. The bill does include high schools, even though high schools did not take iLearn. So for the next 2 years, the only letter grade that will be released will be the letter grade schools received in the 17-18 school year, or if their iLearn scores, if they ended up with a higher letter grade under the current calculation, that grade will show. But 2-year hold harmless, no new consequences. Anyone that is currently under consequences, those will continue, but the current state board waiver processes will remain in place. The other bill that's kind of been fast-tracked from the education perspective this week was House Bill 1002, which decouples any testing information from teacher evaluation plans. This was never a requirement for non-public schools, so I don't think this impacts most of you. But if there are any questions on the hold harmless, accountability, iLearn, feel free to type them in the box. I'll move on to the next section, but Mary will let us know if anything comes up. But most everyone saw the press release. These are a couple bills specific to non-public schools. Senate Bill 250, which is Senator J.D. Ford. He announced with Superintendent McCormick last Friday before session started his intention of filing a bill that would prevent any non-public school from participating in the voucher program if they don't abide by kind of what's set for public and hiring practices. So essentially, the same things we saw last year with the Forrestal Amendment, the Roncalli amendments. This bill has not been assigned to a committee yet, so it's not public. So if you're looking through this bill tracker and wondering where is Senate Bill 250, you're not going to find it. My guess is it's going to show up publicly next week. So once it does, we'll take a close look at that language, find out exactly what it does, and we'll be sure to get a Action Center alert up on our website so it's easy for you and your networks to communicate with legislators about that bill. The other bill specific to private schools that also has not been made public, it was filed yesterday, is the freeway accreditation bill. Many of you will remember House Bill 1640 from last year, which would have streamlined the accreditation process. That bill ended up dying during conference committee last year because it included the cursive writing mandate. So we're back at it this year. It'll be a Senator Buchanan bill, so keep an eye out for that to be added to the bill tracker next week. Yeah, we have a question?
Are you saying the home harmless has been approved already, or just that it is going buildings?
Yes. So the process of the bills, right? So the question was, is the hold harmless already approved? It's in the beginning processes, so it's passed out of the education committees in both the House and the Senate. Yesterday, they both were on second reading in the House and the Senate. No amendments were added. On Monday, both the House and Senate will pass those bills out on third reading. They then have to switch chambers, go through the committee process in the opposite chamber. So by the end of next week, early of the following week, it could be to the governor's desk. So it's not finalized yet, but it's moving along at a rapid pace. Any other questions so far? Okay. Another category that we're seeing a number of bills filed under, and this is a positive one, is a focus on deregulation. Obviously, we're going to need to watch out for new mandates. There are always plenty of bills filed with new requirements if here are things we want to force all schools to do. But there is a focus this year on how do we limit some of those requirements? How do we give schools flexibility to get out of current mandates, and particularly around those mandated teacher training? So a couple of bills I want to highlight. The first one is House Bill 1003. It's a House agenda bill. It essentially sets up a process where any school or group of schools can go to the State Board of Ed and request a waiver from a long list of requirements and statutes that currently apply. You have to essentially present a plan and say, here's why we think we don't need to do this, why it's beneficial to our students. The State Board approves, you're good to go. That bill will be heard on Wednesday in the House Education Committee. That bill also removes the professional growth point, the internship requirement that was put in last year. I know there was a lot of confusion and messaging around that issue out of the department. I think there's been a lot of miscommunication on what it actually required, but the bill changes it from a shall to a may. So I think that should take care of any concerns that folks had on that issue. And then the other big section of that bill will require the state board to make some determinations around mandated teacher training. So right now there's a list of teacher trainings that are required for all teachers. Some of them apply to non-pub, some of them don't, but it essentially gives the state board the authority to say, okay, what's the right timeline for these? Does it need to be every year? Should it be every 5 years? Should it be part of the teacher training process, the teacher prep programs? Should it be a requirement for licensure? But to really have them look at what the right timeline is and the place that it should take place, and make that determination. Senate Bill 295 is a similar version of 1003, not entirely. It's kind of a different concept, but it has an innovation workforce council that's created that would be underneath the State Board of Education. But essentially would be the same body that schools could come to apply for flexibility off of current rules and regulations. The problem I have with this bill at the moment, but I don't think we'll have a problem amending it, is that the list of people who are on the Innovation Workforce Council are State Board appointees, and then folks from all of the school associations, with the exception of no non-public schools. So we will work to make sure there's non-public representation on that committee as well. The other thing that 295 does is it tweaks the child abuse training requirement that was in statute. I know some folks brought up in the last 2 years that it's research and evidence-based required, and there is no evidence-based practice that the DOE can find. So it's been a challenge for schools to find training that meets the technicality of the law. So it makes a correction there. So that's the gist of Senate Bill 295. Two other bills, Senate Bill 261, it's a Senator Sparks bill. It simply changes all of the mandated teacher training requirements from a shall to a may. So instead of you have to do these, you may do these, and the school gets to determine what's important for them. The other one is Senate Bill 266, which requires DOE to evaluate and make recommendations on which teacher training should be mandated or streamlined and what that process should be. That bill is scheduled to be heard next Wednesday in the Senate Education Committee. So any deregulation related questions? All right, Mary, what have you got?
Go home harmless.
Okay.
What about a school that is in sanction? Does that hold harmless, or does it add to the years of sanction?
So the question is back to hold harmless about schools that are currently under sanctions, and if that still applies. So if you are currently under consequences, you remain under consequences unless your letter grade pulls you out of those. That said, the waiver process that the state board has is still in place. So schools can still appeal to the state board to show that the majority of their students are making progress. My guess would be that the state board is well aware of iLearn results and how they're lower for everybody because it is a new test. So I think that will be taken into consideration. So yes, consequences remain if you are currently in consequences, but you can go through the waiver process to ensure that you're still able to accept new students. Now, if you were a D or an F last school year for the first time, and you are a D or an F again this year, under the old process, right, without the hold harmless, you would be put into consequences. No new consequences will happen this year, right? We're essentially taking a two-year break from the consequence timeline under this bill as it currently stands. So if you had your first D or F last year, you will not enter consequences this year if you remain a D or F. It's only for those that are already in the consequences. Is there another question, Mary?
It's the same thing.
Okay. So back to the DREG, just one final point on that. I will say that the DOE earlier this fall, in response to a summer study committee discussion around deregulation, put out a survey to folks in the field about required teacher trainings and how they felt about it. The response of those surveys essentially said, they asked each different required trainings, do you think that the training is appropriate? And in most cases, the people who responded said, yes, we believe the training is appropriate. We believe the time is about right. Now, you had some variation, but overall, everyone believed it was about appropriate. The interesting thing was you got to the end and you said, was this a valuable use of my time? Will it help me? And not everybody who was taking that training thought so. So just interesting that we hear over and over that we have too many mandates, too many requirements, and yet when schools were at, the majority of people thought it's a reasonable requirement. But that said, they're still moving forward with a few different DREG options, so hopefully those move forward. If anyone has ideas or suggestions on those, please keep us posted as to those move throughout. The next bill that I want to draw to your attention is Senate Bill 246. This is a mental health in schools issue. Many of you will remember this from the school safety conversations last year. I believe it was in House Bill 1004. There was also a Senate bill around this, but this is a kind of a return to that issue. I believe it's part of the governor's agenda. There's a lot of concern and questions about what does this really mean, but essentially for non-public schools, it says that Anybody who wants to apply for a secured school safety grant must, by July 1, 2021, have in place an MOU with a community health care provider that can provide services, mental health services to their students. Not a whole lot of detail in the bill on what level of services we're talking about. There is language that clarifies that parents have to sign off and approve of that. But a whole lot of questions around what about access to providers? Will there be a cost to schools? Is this just a referral process? So we've reached out to the governor's office, have heard there's some example MOUs. So as soon as we have that information, we'll share it with you. But I know there are concerns among many legislators about this path, so I'm sure this is what we're going to hear a lot about. It's definitely on our radar. If anybody does have an existing, MOU or relationship with a healthcare provider, please let us know what that looks like and how it's working out. We'd love to know, if there are positive things that we can do to amend this bill. It's always easier to take suggestions to a bill than just say, this bill's terrible, it should die. So we'd love to know what's working.
Well,
Yes.
I was in the hearings last year for the Homeland Security when they incorporated all the mental health stuff. And to me, it is on the heels of the social emotional learning. Because Eli Lilly put in $50 million into the schools for the social emotional learning. And it is all about the mental health, and they're hiring more counselors. Our area in West County, they got a reward for the mental health efforts in the development. And it comes out from West County, and we win. And it's data mining and documented assessment and with all the mental health records. So I think it's a harmful direction. I see why they did it, but they got all that Homeland Security that scared everybody that was in the training and incorporated all their mental health indoctrination in there. And I'm
So
not concerned about that.
we're continuing to hear those concerns from a number of legislators and exactly what the level of privacy is. I think when I spoke to folks in the governor's office, their goal is that we just want to make sure that if a student needs resources, they're referred there, but how that plays out.
And that's their philosophy. I mean, it's very compelling. The teachers want extra help, and there are a lot of discipline problems with children, a lot of concerns. But I don't think the solution is going to be helpful to students at all.
So what we're mostly concerned about is that this will limit access. It doesn't require everyone to do it, right? Non-pubs aren't required to do it unless they want access to the secured safety grant fund. So that's our concern on that part right now.
Medical health care provider or student health care?
It's mental health care. And so, we're still trying to figure out exactly what all falls under that, right? It could be social emotional, it could be, medical related things to that. So it's very broad. We're just trying to get all the details to make sure we have the facts straight of exactly what they want to do and make sure if they do move forward with the bill, everything is flushed out so it's very clear. So again, we've got requests into the governor's office and the Department of Health for more specific information. I believe like 70 or 80% of school corporations as of last year did have some sort of agreement in place. So we're trying to learn what exactly those look like and learn from those so that we're dealing with the facts and what it can look like.
Can I ask you, the 70-80%, is that all schools, public schools, private?
It says school corporations, so I assume, because those are the only ones who are required to at this point in time.
Okay, so it's required.
Yes.
Thank you.
So those are the main issues that I had flagged that I know there's going to be a lot of discussion about coming up in this session. As I mentioned before, there are always issues about new regulations. Just an example of that would be House Bill 1167, which is a Representative Porter bill, which requires, we just talked about all this BREG, and this would require any accredited non-public school that accepts some form of taxpayer dollars. So it doesn't specifically reference the voucher program, but I think it would fall, tax credit scholarship program would fall under this as well. But to have to adopt bullying and discipline rules. So again, just additional requirements that I think most schools are already handling in some way. We don't necessarily need a law to do it, but we're on the lookout for those. So as you all look through this bill tracker, are there any other bills that you have questions about or ask about? I'm happy to go through a few more, just to maybe interesting, but want to make sure we cover anything that you guys have questions about.
Do you have Christy Stutzman's bill on high school women's sports and the transgender?
That one's not yet. I haven't seen that. It's not published
It
yet.
hasn't been published. It's just been filed.
Yes.
So
The only bills that we can see and put on this report are ones that are public at this point.
right. So that would be one that we're watching because it will protect girls in high school. It's successfully. I'll look for the number.
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
So thanks for the heads up on that.
And the definition of gender in Tom's bill, the Senate bill,
Yes.
for the BMD, which does affect students because it's anybody getting a driver's license, the definitions
Okay.
of sex and gender.
Any other specific bills? Questions?
Yes. HB 1158. Minimum teacher salary. Does that apply to all school corporations, government, and non-government?
To pull this one up and look at specifics. So there, you're going to see a handful of bills in here that talk about teacher salary. I will be surprised if any of them move this session because it's a non-budget year, and because so this one would require that all teachers be paid, and it says to a corporation here. My guess is it may apply to a charter school, but probably not a non-public school. It's impossible for the state to set a minimum salary without taking over all of the salary schedules, right? Which would totally take away local control, and there hasn't been a desire to do that. So there are probably going to be a dozen or so teacher pay related bills by the time all of them are public. I don't expect any of them.
I talked to Christy Stutzman on limiting the student testing.
Yes.
And I think she's trying to make it so there's not so many tests at the third grade level.
Yep. So 1180 is a bill that says that the iRead 3 should be administered at the same time as iLearn. So this issue is actually coming up at the state board of that meeting on Wednesday, I believe this is coming Wednesday. There's been some discussion about can we use iLearn as a screener for iRead. So that will be the discussion on Wednesday. So this bill, I just talked with Chairman Boehning yesterday, and we discussed this bill. He's interested in hearing it and how it moves. We want to make sure that it kind of works with what the state board's doing. I think everyone's on board with if we can get fewer tests, that'd be great. So if we can make sure that iLearn can be used as a screener for it, that we're still measuring the right things, as long as we're making sure, I mean, it's important to make sure that kids know how to read before they leave third grade. I think that's an important test. We've received lots of national research that shows states who've adopted these policies, their students are performing higher when it comes to reading, so I think there is a direct correlation there. But yes, we expect this discussion to be taken up at the state board and look forward to hearing what our assessment and TAC experts have to say about how we can move forward with this. My guess is, it obviously is not going to happen in time for the testing this spring, but it could be a possibility for next spring. There is another iRead bill, I think Representative Prescott has it, which would eliminate iRead 3. I think he just had the same concern. I don't believe that bill will be moving, but I do think that there are folks that are serious about looking at, can we consolidate these in some way or use them as a screener? So if anyone has thoughts or concerns about that, please let us know. Senate Bill 57 is everyone's favorite bill. It's the cursive writing mandate, so it's back. Don't know if it'll be heard, but
Jean Lansing is my senator. I would like to see her get that at least moving forward.
well,
Do we know why it's continually the Why it's always a lot?
Because it's an additional mandate on schools. So there's nothing prohibiting schools from teaching cursive right now. They can do it. But it's just another one of those mandates that we probably don't need to put everything in statute and let schools kind of decide for themselves.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question is, at what grade level? Because I remember I learned it in third grade, and now, I don't think they even deal with it in high school.
No,
Yes.
So the question was about cursive writing, and whether or not it will receive a hearing or not. It was Senate Bill 57.
it's like 10 years, I think it's almost 10 years.
Another bill that I'll point out, it kind of relates to school governance and the change we have with the upcoming appointment of the Secretary of Education beginning next year. Senate Bill 143, Senator Zay filed a bill to change the makeup of the State Board of Education. Not sure if this bill is going to move forward. I have had some brief conversations with legislators about it, but essentially takes authority away from the governor and his appointees and gives the legislature more appointees to the state board. Personally, I hope this bill does not move forward this year. I'd like to get to the point where we an incredible deal of amount of authority
does it matter if it says in God we trust, or if you change it in Allah we trust, in Jehovah we trust, in Yahweh we trust? Does it matter?
So the question for everyone online was, can the motto be changed? It doesn't say in God we trust, but in whatever God is in that religion. So first of all, I want to be clear that Senate Bill 131 does not apply to non-public schools. It only applies to public schools. So the way it's written now doesn't even apply to any of you. But that very question came up of, can it be modified? And under the bill language, no, because it specifically says the national model of the United States. And so we would need to go to Congress and have them change the national motto. So
It's an education tool to reinforce our national model.
So are there any other questions or comments on bills? If not, we can move on to the couple additional resources and events that I want to remind everybody of. And go back to the PowerPoint slide.
Like always on Wednesdays, the education.
Yes, both Senate and House typically meet on Wednesday. The House meets Wednesday mornings at 8:30, and the Senate meets Wednesday afternoons at 1:30. That will vary some, right? The House committee sometimes will have a Tuesday meeting or a Monday meeting based on things, but that's typically the case. Every Wednesday there'll be education committee meetings. Does it hold up?
One question. Sure. SB 69 on the firearms on school property. You know, there are some teachers that are concerned, well, not in our place, at high school level, of third kids coming with firearms, and some teachers know themselves and students. So does this apply? Is this a public school thing, or is this all schools?
So the question is on Senate Bill 69, possession of firearms and school property, and who exactly does it apply to? So this bill specifically just ensures that law enforcement officers and retired law enforcement officers are allowed to come onto a school premise with a weapon. Yeah. So this doesn't get into teachers or other individuals in the school carrying anyone. That's not what this bill does.
Okay.
Yep. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint screen. The first link there I want to show you, and hopefully everyone can see it now. You don't have to go to the link, but the link to our Action Center is there. So just a reminder to everyone, our Action Center, it's easy to search to find who your legislator is, and you can easily email or make a phone call or tweet at your legislator. We also will put up, as bills become available and we know they're being heard, specifically like the Senator Ford Bill 250, when that's publicly posted, we'll have an action alert up to it, and others that may pop up throughout the session. An easy way for you to communicate with legislators, for you to share with your parents and your network and your teachers, to make sure that legislators are hearing from private school leaders and parents on what's important to them. So please watch your inboxes for any alerts from us on the Action Center. If you want to just go email your legislator, this is an easy way to do it. The next slide just has a few upcoming dates. So National School Choice Week is coming up at the end of January. We always try to celebrate. So Monday the 13th is our final day, our deadline for the video contest. So if you haven't gotten your videos, your parent videos, please do so. The link is up there so people can get all the details and how to submit them. But there is a cash prize contest or a cash prize for the winner. And we will be honoring those students, those winners at our breakfast. And for those of you in the room trying to take a picture of this link, we will send this out to you so you'll have the link too.
Okay.
Wednesday, January 29th will be IQE's kind of celebration at the State House. We host a breakfast every year with policymakers, and we bring students parents and a couple educators. So space is limited at that. If you haven't already signed up but are interested, the whole goal of this is to have students who have a compelling story who want to share it with legislators about why school choice matters to them. So if you have any students or parents who would be interested in that, please let us know. We'd be happy to help set that up. Again, space is limited, so we don't just open it up to everybody because we need to know how many people we're feeding and try to fit everyone in a room. But it's a great opportunity to have one-on-one interaction with legislators. The governor will also be there. We always get a nice picture with the students and the governor. So it's a great morning. It's 7:30 in the morning. I know that's not easy for folks, but if you have any interest, please let us know. And then that same evening, January 29th, our partners at EdChoice are going to be hosting a reception and a screening of the new school choice movie that's out in West Virginia. Gotten fantastic reviews across the country. That is open to anyone who wants to come. So the RSVP link is on there. And again, we'll send this out to everyone so you have it. It'll be at the Conrad in downtown Indianapolis. So that's all I have. If there are any last minute questions, please feel free to chime in. If not, the whole IQE team is here throughout session to assist you guys. So please don't hesitate to email or call with any questions as they come up. Again, we will continue updating this bill tracker. So please keep an eye on it next week and the following week as all the bills become published. And let us know if you see any that you have concerns with, that you'd like to testify on. We're more than happy to be helpful. So
The one question I have is, there's been such a big deal with the ISTA and the union, and they are against school choice publicly. How is that impacting what you guys are doing?
Sure. So
and, I know there's over 1,000 parents that are become part of Purple for Parents, and that's kind of the information link that is supporting school choice.
So the question was about the Indiana State Teachers Association and their Red for Ed kind of action days and how that impacts the school choice movement. So ISTA has scheduled 4 days of action to be for people to come to the State House. They had their first one on Wednesday of this week. This week at the State House they were there. Yes. And so I will say that there wasn't it wasn't anything like their organization day event. They had, a dozen or so people there. A couple of them testified in committee, but they provided, kind of like legislative briefings and meetings with legislators when it came down. So we'll continue to watch those throughout session. There are 3 more of them scheduled. I will say for how it's impacting, legislators are definitely concerned about the Red for Ed movement. I mean, we had anywhere from, depending on whose estimates you look at, 10,000 to 15,000 teachers at the State House on Organization Day. It was a big number. If we needed to do something like that, I think we would struggle to get 50 parents at the State House. Advocacy is something that we are really trying to push our schools to be more engaged in, to get your parents and your school board members and your entire networks more engaged in that, which is why we have things like the Action Center to try to make that easier. But it's definitely having an impact. We've had numerous conversations with legislative leadership who's typically very supportive of school choice, but this year in an election year with all the pressure from Red for Ed, a lot of legislators are nervous and don't want to do anything to expand school choice this year. I think it's going to make conversations harder. We're going to see more and more bills filed that would try to, eliminate or harm or chip away at school choice policies. And those conversations become harder and harder every year, which is why we need schools and to kind of help us with that engagement. So definitely has an impact. Thank you for asking that question.
Well, and I would just encourage anybody that wants to protect school choice to seek out the Purple for Parents, because there's over 1,000 that have risen up in a very short period of time, and they would be a movement to help.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions, again, please allow us to be a resource for you. And thank you for your time this morning. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being
A lot
here.
of work.
It's